To the New Kind of Man podcast, where today we have Scott Turansky on the podcast. And I want to begin the conversation with this quote from his book that he co-authored. And this is the quote: "A spiritual battle is raging for our children's hearts. In today's world, parents can't be complacent and just hope everything will turn out okay. So we need to get this right." Thank you so much, Scott, for coming on the podcast today.
Chad, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you are definitely an expert when it comes to parenting and specifically biblical parenting, which I want to lean heavily into. And you have your doctorate, and you and your wife, Kathy, have 5 kids and 6 grandkids. So how's that going so far?
It's great. My wife's name's Carrie, and Carrie is a women's fiction author. She works for Waterbrook Press, and she writes women's fiction and Christian fiction. And so it's just an intriguing way to look at history. So it's a historical outlook on history. So she's got quite a following and hangs around with some of these great authors. So people could find her work at carrieturansky.com if they're interested in women's fiction.
Awesome. So you guys are busy, kind of in 2 different spheres, but doing good work. That's awesome.
Yeah, when we go on vacation, we write, but she's writing fiction, I'm writing nonfiction, and we do enjoy collaborating together on family and life.
Neat. So just for curiosity's sake, how do those 2 things coalesce? Do they ever go together? Do you ever get inspired? Obviously, you get inspired by her, but because she's obviously a creative as well, but how does her work inspire your work?
Well, they are completely separate. So her
Sure.
ability to write fiction is an amazing thing. For her to read her story about crossing the English Channel, the first airplane to do that, it's fascinating. Now, she'll take some of my parenting ideas and weave them into her story, how they're working on things. But that's just, that's a small piece of what each of us do. We collaborate more closely on family and church. She and I work closely in the church work. And then when it comes to family, we love our children and are helping them, and our grandchildren we take care of together. So we collaborate a lot more on those areas.
Awesome. And you have also co-authored 15 books on parenting, and you have a 12-part video family experience, and I'll link all this in the show notes. People can see about your work and in the videos that you have, which are excellent. And you are the co-founder of the National Center for Biblical Parenting. You're a pastor and professor at Concordia University. Sounds like you are busy, sir.
Yes, I am busy. You're right. But I really enjoy what we do. So I can't imagine cutting any of those things out. God is working in some great ways, and we enjoy being a part of it.
Yeah. So, you getting into this work, obviously you're a parent and now a grandparent, and I'm assuming that you've been, really involved in your kids' lives and grandkids' lives the whole time. But what actually motivated you to do a deep dive into parenting? Because it appears to me that you're a high-level guy, as your wife is a high-level person. So you could be doing a multitude of things, but why did you get into this work?
When I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents did a great job of parenting, fell in love with the Bible at an early age. I just remember when I was 4 years old, we had devotions, and I learned about Jesus being the light of the world. And we had devotions in the dark, in the closet with a flashlight. It was just, wow. I fell in love with God's word because it was always this activity and excitement about these things, a treasure hunt in the backyard or running a race around the house, all tying into some reference to God and what he's doing in his word. So I really enjoyed that. And then as I worked in children's ministry all through my teen years, I was teaching Sunday school, working in a summer day camp program. And I just fell in love with this idea of working with children. And I know that parents are key to that. So when my first son was born, I have 5 kids. When my first son was born, I started teaching parenting seminars. In part because I was learning so much about parenting, and other parents were just wondering what was going on. And so we started talking then and sharing. And God did some great things in those early years and helped me to understand more about parenting. And as we got 5 kids and some real challenges in the home, I really sensed an empathy that I share with parents, because it's not easy. It's a difficult and overwhelming task sometimes. And so as a dad, I had to make some changes, adjustments in who I am, and work on that. And so continuing to work in this parenting field was helpful for me as I worked with my children and helped other people.
Yeah, and applying the same principles that you were telling everyone else about, I'm sure, and probably that you're learning firsthand through all that process as well.
Right.
So, part of the community of men that I'm involved with, there seems to always have this question that circulates. It's, at what point should dads become involved with their kids? That's part of the question. And then the other one is, how do they do it if they decide to engage at an early age? So at what point do you think that men should be as active or jumping in to be active with their kids? And then how would they go about that at an early age?
I really like it that the culture's changing and we're seeing more men very involved in the early childhood development of their kids. That means getting up in the night and bringing the baby to mom so she can feed her or him or something like that. Just early involvement we see. I would suggest that if parents are trying to, as a dad is trying to work with a young child, they want to learn how to nurture and comfort. Those are very important words for us to understand, nurture and comfort with our kids. I think that sometimes as dads, we're more ready to jump in when we see them crossing the lines or need correction, or when they need training or want to play games with them. All of that is great, but nurturing them and comforting them is a great place to start early on. And then as soon as they get to, as they keep moving up until 2-3 years old, then we're going to start putting limits on a mobile child, or we're going to start setting schedules for them that bring some more structure into their lives. Children will tend to push back with some of that. The parenting philosophy that we engage in at that moment is very important. If it's child-centric and we start feeding selfishness inside of children and allow them to do whatever they want and so on, that tends to backfire, and parents usually see that after a couple of years. They go, whoa, my child is arguing with me and he's angry and he can't accept no for an answer, and if things don't go his way, he gets upset. And so we often are jumping into families' lives at that age, 4 and 5 years old, where parents are saying, we got to do something different because what we're doing isn't working. So I would suggest that getting involved in children's lives early and helping them to make some changes in the way that they have been interacting with their children and what they're teaching. And that can be really helpful for them and guiding them in a way that's going to give them what they need in order to be successful. So children are in a process of learning. Parents, dads in particular, have a very special role in the lives of their kids. So we want to empower them to do that.
And I could see it being beneficial to nurture and comfort at an early age. Then when you get into the discipline or the correction stages, that there's a level of relational trust that's there, and knowing that they're not just seeing the fierceness of the man or fierceness of the dad, but also the comfort that he's a safe place to go to, not just when there's a bump in the night, but also a safe place to go to, developing later in years whenever they start dating. One of the things that I've tried to do with my community, and I've tried to do this with my own kids. I have a 23-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter, is started the parenting process, like who my kids are now and my relationship with my kids now is, it began when, literally right out of the hospital, and I was able to hold them and to care for them and, wondering if I was going to break them because they were so gentle and I just didn't know what to do. But now I see there's all of these layers of relational trust. So now when there's something that's going on or my son needs advice, he says, hey, Dad, what do you think about this? And I find those things to be very valuable. And how's that worked itself out in your personal life, Scott?
Well, first, let me share with you a scripture. 2 Corinthians chapter 1 says, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort. And I always stop there and I go, wow, God is, two things are noted there about God: a God of compassion, a God of comfort, as in his fatherly role with us. And it says he comforts us in our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. So there's this very real part of fatherhood that involves comfort. And what do you do? How do you comfort somebody? I mean, that's really important for us to learn. Sometimes with a little baby, you just hold the baby and comfort them as they're settling down. But how do you comfort your wife?
Right.
We got to ask this very important question about comfort that I think is tailored specifically to the person we're comforting. There's some children, you try to comfort them and by touching them, don't touch me, they don't want to be touched. And if you're a toucher, you like to touch a child, then that could be hard. We have to learn, what does it look like to comfort a child? And I think you're right, Chad. I think that when you build a layers of comfort and relationship, then it earns you the right to step in and say, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that. You're not going to be able to go to the party this Friday night with a teenager. But it doesn't just happen with rules and regulations. It starts with this whole dynamic of relationship that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think is maybe the number one thing, or one of the main things that are opposing parents today?
I think there's a worldly philosophy that exists out there, so that when parents do want to work with their children, they're taught a behavior modification kind of an approach, which is, if you do this, I'll give you that. And I think that really breeds a lot of selfishness in children. If you say to a child, even a young child, let's take a really young child, clean up your mess and you can have a snack, or get dressed and you can go out and play. What we're saying to a child is, I'll give you what you want if you do what I say. Now, if you carry that too far with children, you're building selfishness inside their hearts. And over a period of time, what takes place is that children become demanding, entitled, view themselves as victims in life. Their selfishness kind of overcomes them. They start asking questions like, are you going to pay me for that? Or what's in it for me? Or what's the minimum I need to do in order to get my reward? I just think that whole philosophy damages children. And we are really trying to work with parents to develop a heart-based approach, which is completely different. It's focusing not just on behavior and giving rewards and punishment. It's focusing on something much deeper inside a child's heart.
How would they do that? The heart-based parenting. I mean, it sounds great. And in your book, I know that you detail this, but if you could just kind of give some of the summary points or application points just for our conversation, just so people know even more deeply what's the difference between behavior modification and heart-based parenting.
Great. So heart-based parenting, first of all, we have to ask God, what is the heart? And so if we dig into the scriptures and we just look at the Bible, and every time, 750 times the word heart is used. And if we draw out of that an understanding of what the heart is, we find several different pieces. The Bible says, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. So that tells us desires exist in there. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and other verses help us see that emotions exist there. Attitudes exist in the heart. Convictions and beliefs. Believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, Romans 12 says. So we know that all of these things are inside of the heart. So when we parent, we must be looking to change what children believe. We're looking to help their desires be flexible, because desires can turn into expectations and then turn into demands. All right, and that happens inside of the heart. We have a demanding heart. We want to help them manage emotions, which isn't just stop giving me that look. We're going to help them deal with that on a heart level. So you're asking a question, how do we do heart-based parenting? We have developed a whole coaching program to walk a family, parents, through a plan to help a child change their hearts. I'll just give you a quick overview. There's 7 tools we use. But then every tool is like a bucket of resources. We develop a written plan out of each bucket. I'll just go over the 7 tools real quick so you know what they are, and we can go into them if you want any of them. The first one's relationship, which you've kind of talked about already with comforting. We must build relationship and look for emotional connectedness. The second one is firmness. Every good plan needs firmness. Firmness builds character. If a relationship opens the heart, we need to recognize that firmness builds character. We set limits. It's not just about consequences. It's about structures and moving children in a direction. The third one is visioning. Visioning is talking about why we're going to do this. I want you to know, son, you're going to be a leader someday.
Mm.
And so leaders need to learn how to follow and so on. So we're talking about visioning. Here's why we're going to work on these things in our lives. The next one after coaching, in the next one after visioning is teaching. We're going to show you how to do it, very specific, practical ways. And then we're going to work on prayer and all the spiritual dynamics, because changing the heart involves spiritual exercises, especially in a child who's responsive spiritually. Then what we're going to do is we're going to move to coaching. Coaching is an attitude a parent has with a child of, hey, I'm on your side, I'm on your team, not a policeman trying to regulate you, but I'm trying to help you to move forward. And coaching implies practice. So the heart-based approach is all about practicing to move in a direction. Next, we have the whole idea of transferring responsibility to the child. So that's what God does with us. In fact, all of these 7 tools that I just mentioned are ways that God works with us, and we then go into every one of those pieces in order to help a parent move forward. So the very first, here's how you can tell and get started in a heart-based approach. Ask yourself this question: what is something that's bothering me about my child? That is, there's a pattern going on here that I know if that child doesn't resolve this pattern, he's going to be in trouble. Maybe he argues with me every time I give him something to do, or he has a bad attitude, or maybe he lacks focus and can't stay on a task. I'm feeling uncomfortable about that as a dad. I'm saying, okay, I need to do something about it. The first thing I want to do after I identify the problem is I want to identify the heart-based solution. This child gets angry all the time. What does he need? He needs more self-control. If a child can't handle the answer no, he needs to learn more contentment or gratitude instead of always wishing he had something he doesn't have. So now I'm working towards something. And when I work toward that goal, then the point A problems, the problem areas start to dissipate. So we develop very specific strategies to deal with problems, but we're mainly doing it through training and moving children in a positive direction.
Okay, so let me just kind of go into it, just helping the listener to understand it in the way that I think that I have it. Instead of just addressing, maybe your child is dealing with anger, instead of just telling your kids, hey, don't be angry, it's asking them the necessary questions, spending time with them, walking them through, getting to the heart of the issue as to see why they're angry.
Maybe, okay, but let's see, you're moving a parent into this role of kind of psychologist. And I'm not sure we as parents are all that equipped to do that. And I don't even know if you need to know why. Now, maybe if you can identify why is because we're not spending enough time relating, or another child's just come on board and there's some competition. You can identify that, that's fine. But if we do a lot of work on the why side, it's a deep pit about why our lives are the way they are. Just look at you and me. I mean, we start asking why about it, who I am. That's a complicated question. I would rather not spend too much time on the why. What I'd like to do is I'd like to spend a lot more time on the how. How are we going to get out of this problem instead of why are we there? In other words, I want to focus on point B and the solution more than where we are. And frankly, when you talk about anger and a parent comes to me and says, hey, I'd like to work with you in the coaching program on my child's anger. I say, okay, we got 8 weeks. Let's work together. I say, we're not going to start with anger. We're going to start with teaching your child how to give up their agenda and come when called, follow an instruction, in the getting things done. Let's just try to get some things done, start moving, because what we're going to do now is we're going to exercise this child's heart to soften their heart through some practice sessions so that a child can learn to let go of their agenda. That's so practical when it comes to anger. We always have to let go of things. So we're moving in a direction with children. It's focused on training, not on correction. Not that the correction's bad. We're just focusing our training on where they need to go and where they need to be. It's just so positive and so powerful to do that. We see major changes in children's lives in just a few weeks.
Okay. So in that, it's not so much the why, to getting into it because you're kind of into the weeds, like you said, and even dabbling into some psychology that parents most likely wouldn't be trained enough for. So instead, it's not just assuming, but it's going with the knowledge of, hey, this is a heart issue. So let's start working the heart in an area where we're going to train them to do the right thing.
Yes. See, Jesus told us about the heart. He said, you got all these offenses and sins. He says, they all come from the heart of a person. It's out of the heart that the mouth speaks. So what we're saying is, let's see, you'll know if you feel uncomfortable, if you see a tendency. Tendencies are indicators of the heart. If they do it, a child gets angry once, that may be out of character for them. What we're trying to do is help a child understand more about specifics and be able to address those in their hearts through more training and work and so on. So that's where we're headed.
Okay. Okay. So should a dad seek to parent a child any different based on their gender?
Well, I would say
Just simply based off gender. I realize that every child's different, and we're not going to parent style. It needs to be, I believe it needs to be matched up parent to that specific child.
yeah,
But like talking about the genders, because the reason why, let me just give you a little backstory with this. I have some guys that I'm connected with, and they seem to easily connect to little boys, but not little girls. And so I think that their kind of approach is always the same. So I was just wondering, should it be a similar approach, or are there some things that we can do to help dads to connect with little girls at the earliest of ages?
so I guess the answer has to be yes, because that's what God does with us. God doesn't treat us all alike. He considers our uniqueness and gives each person a spiritual gift, and that spiritual gift manifests itself differently. He doesn't talk about gender relationships in particular when he's giving out gifts, but the implication is that we discover the child's uniqueness, and gender is a part of their uniqueness. So we want to be considerate of that as we're moving forward. But I find that many parents come to me with girls and they say, oh man, I wish I would have had boys, or we're having problems because we got girls. And I'm going, I talk to parents of boys and I talk to parents of girls, and I'm going, they all got problems. All right. So what
For
we need
sure.
to do, if we're going to help a child change, is we need to find out their uniqueness. And it's not just about gender. Although gender is a key issue, as you say, there are other areas where we're going to say, this child is sensitive, whether it's a boy or a girl. This child's particularly sensitive. So I want to help that child to develop the ability to use that sensitivity in their personality with some good things in their life. So I'm going to tailor a plan for that child that's going to move that child in a direction that's going to be great. So overall, generally, I would say gender is an important issue, but when it comes down to specifics, we got character issues in our children's lives that we're going to be addressing, and those are not gender specific.
Okay. I read it. It might have been actually my first parenting book that I ever read. And I think the title of the book is called Different Children, Different Needs. I can't remember the author's name. But in that book, they talk about personality styles, and specifically how the adults' personality styles, and it goes off the DISC model. And then it also goes into then at the child level, and then little tips and helps on to connect different personality types. Because what I found to be true is I tend to respond in the way that I would want to be responded to based off my personality, not based off the person I'm talking to. And I can be very upfront and abrupt and harsh and direct. And like you had just said, some people, if they're more sensitive, they may think, wow, he was a jerk. I can't believe he said that. And I was like, no, I was trying to say it in the most loving way that I could, but it was like I was talking to myself. Mm-hmm. So do you think it would be valuable for parents, for dads, to go through any sort of personality typing or profiles for their kids?
Yes. I think those are standardized kind of profiles, and you can find out if you're a color, what color you are, or what animal you are, or
right.
All these different things you can figure out, and those are helpful for insight and creating awareness. The greatest thing you want to do, though, is study your child, and you want to start finding out things. What does this child like to do when at rest? What does this child like to do when sad? When you start asking those real questions, you're going to gain the insight you need in order to develop that. I mean, I just, this last week, my son, who's 32 years old, he and his wife, because of work, he's at work and they're doing all these things with the colors. Okay. And so he says, Dad, I'm orange. I can solve problems on the spot, under pressure. Great. And I said, great. Well, what about your wife? And he says, well, she's blue. And I said, okay, so that means when you talk to her and you come in with your problem-solving strategy, she might not appreciate it that much. So I think those tests are great because they create more sensitivity and awareness of others
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that others aren't just like me.
Mm.
And so they're having fun and laughing about their differences, and their appreciation for each other is admirable. So I do think those kind of tests, and you can get them free on personality kinds of evaluations and
Mm-hmm.
on the internet, and I think they can be helpful. The key thing, though, is study your child, and if that's a way you can do that, great. It'll help you a lot.
I loved in your book how you put this so simplistically and so easy to just grasp and to think about and apply. You said to engage with, to know and understand your kids' emotions, because as guys, we hear the word emotion and we drop back 5 feet and we pretend we can't speak that whatever that language is. Like we just try to remove ourselves from it. And I loved how you said it in your book, and you said one of those words just a minute ago, which is why this question was triggered. You said it's as simple as being able to recognize what makes them sad, what makes them glad, and what makes them mad.
Good. Yeah, those are 3 different emotions. Here's what I would say. I'm going to just break that down a little bit more for you.
Mm-hmm.
I say every person in their world, in their lives, needs to deal with 3 categories of emotions. One is anger, and that's blocked goals, violated rights, frustration, hurt from the past, any of those things, anger. The second one is sadness, which has to do with disappointment, despair, discouragement, and so on. And third one's anxiety. You didn't mention that, but that's a real common problem today, is anxiety that has to do with worry, fear, specific anxiety or generalized anxiety that children experience. Everybody needs a plan for each one of those. And the way we parent our child now can equip them to address those 3 categories of emotions as they get older. So that's part of what we do in the coach training, is we're saying to parents, hey, we're going to prepare your child for the future. We're not just going to solve your problem right now. We're going to help that child gain the life skills they need to be able to live even as an adult and help other people with their challenges.
I love that. And I love the partnership there too. And I'm reminded of Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way that he should go. And when he's old, he will not depart from it. And it sounds to me like in these seminars that you're saying, no, we're going to partner together to train your child. And what I love, even in that word child, it's used in the Bible in different ways, not just in the infant side of it, but also through the young ages, all the way through adolescence, all the way up to the marrying age. And man, I can tell you, I am in all of those, or I've been in all of those, and I would have benefited from that. Let me ask you this, just based off what you just talked about in relating to anxiety and those things. Is there one of your books specifically that deals with that? I don't remember reading that in the Parenting is Heart Work. I may have missed it, but did you actually cover that in that book?
Let's see. There are 4 books that go together as part of our coaching program.
Okay.
Those 4 books, they can be found at biblicalparenting.org/training. So they're all easily marked there if you don't want to write them all down. But Parenting is Heart Work helps people understand more about what the heart is and compares it to behavior modification. That study is a very important one. Then we have the training manual that helps parents with specific techniques. That's the Parenting is Heart Work training manual with specific training exercises, because training implies practice. Okay, so that book contains the exercises parents are going to engage in. Then there's the book Motivate Your Child, which deals with the conscience and spiritual training in children. So moral and spiritual development in children. That's a book published by Thomas Nelson. And then there's the Motivate Your Child Action Plan, which helps us move any problem, whatever the problem is. We can move a child from point A to point B in their lives. So we're moving them in this direction in order to get there. So together, those are 20 audio sessions with all of those books. I mean, it's a package of books that I think parents would benefit from. They're the same books we use in the coaching program as we're guiding parents to think deeply. So yes, we take parents into all of those areas and try to help them know what to do.
Awesome. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, and I want to ask you this question. How can a dad know that he's speaking to the heart and not just speaking to the head?
Well, the Bible says in Proverbs that a heart is a deep waters, but a man of understanding draws it out.
Mm.
Um, some sensitivity and some experience, you'll know. Okay, so let's say that you play a tickling game with your child and you stop and the child's just delighted. That delight is coming from the heart.
Mm.
But if you play the tickling game too long and the child's crying, that's also coming from the heart. I encourage parents, stop games early when they're at a high point. Don't wait till they go down.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're playing, teasing and tickling games are not bad. They just need to know when to stop. So that's just an example in a very simple way of seeing a child's heart, either good or bad. Now, I think parents are often looking for ways to connect to their child's heart. And I think parents make a mistake, or let me say this, I often in my coaching program, parents saying, I've told them, I have all these conversations with him about why lying isn't good, or why his anger is going to cause him problems. I've been telling him this for years. He doesn't listen. And my response to that is, your dialogue probably isn't reaching his heart.
Mm.
Your child probably needs practice sessions. Firmness. You're using very good tools, but they're not the right tools for this particular child.
Mm.
A child with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder usually doesn't learn through dialogue. That doesn't mean we stop dialoguing, but it means we're going to set up practice sessions to build obligation inside of the child's heart. An obligation overcomes urge. And so when obligation increases, there's a tipping point where urges are managed. And now we've done through training and practice sessions and experiential learning, we've brought someone from where they are to where they need to be. I'm sure that's what Jesus was doing with Peter. Peter in the Bible, he was continually talking out of turn, wanting to get out of the boat when he shouldn't be, cutting people's ears off. I mean, typical guy with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And what did Jesus do? Jesus used an experiential approach with Peter. Peter, have everybody sit down. We're going to feed them 5,000. You come over here. We're going to feed these 5,000 people. Take the baskets and you pass them out. Peter, come on over. I'm going to bring you and just a couple others. We're going to go over and heal this girl. And so I'm going to go up on the mountain and you're going to experience me with Elijah and the transfiguration. For Peter, it was all about experiential learning. And man, built inside of him such a passion for life and for the Lord that when he wrote his epistles, they're just powerful epistles. And he had a tremendous impact on the kingdom. So experiential learning is a different way than dialogue. And sometimes parents feel like they're doing their duty, but they're not connecting with the heart. So some sensitivity here, I think some learning, some insight often equips parents with new tools so they can know what to do. Let me just say, I wrote one of the books I wrote is called The Christian Parenting Handbook. It has 50 short chapters in it. And the reason I wrote it is for this very reason. Parents are saying, I'm not connecting with my child's heart. I said, okay, I'm going to give you 50 ideas about connecting with your buckshot. Just here's some different ways you can do that. Each chapter is like 4 or 5 pages. You can read it really quickly. And the idea is I need more tools. I need to broaden my thinking about the heart and how to relate to it. And once you get those ideas, then you can go deeper into some of these training exercises that we're talking about.
Excellent. Excellent. I know that there's this phrase, or I guess it's not really necessarily even just a phrase, but it's kind of like this mentality with a lot of dads and a lot of men that they think, well, their job as the provider is just to make sure that their kids get stuff. And they think, well, I've done what I was supposed to. I brought you the money, or I brought the money into the house. I bought you the toy that you wanted. I got you the car you wanted when you turned 16. And obviously this can get into all sorts of problems, but way before the problems come, how can a dad be engaged to let his kids know that he cares about them?
Okay, so I would suggest that, first of all, that line of thinking that I'm just the provider, it's pretty old-fashioned. At least the parenting seminars that come to my parenting seminars, we got men and women. We're seeing a lot more men come to them now because they realize that's not something they want. Maybe they had it when they were children, but even their dads, many of them were ones like my father, engaged in their development. And so I think caring for them is going to involve time, but it's involving time that's strategic. When a dad comes alongside and coaches a child, They can coach them in baseball. I mean, we have that all the time. Dads stepping in the girls' softball team and coaching. So those are good coaching opportunities. But I'm talking about coaching in life.
Mm.
So when a parent comes alongside of a 5-year-old and says, son, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you learn how to come when called. It's such a valuable tool because Samuel learned to come when called when he was a little boy. And God spoke to him because he was ready to listen to God. I'm going to help you do that. Or we come along a 10-year-old and say, son, I'm going to help you to be a leader.
Mm.
And I want to help you to be successful in what you're doing. And that means that I'm going to teach you how to follow instructions so that you can know what that's like. We come along a 15-year-old and we say, honey, I'm going to help you, daughter, I'm going to help you to be able to manage your emotions in tight situations. This is going to be so great because your sensitivity that you have to other people's emotions will help you to be successful in life. So if we follow this model of I see a problem, I know what the solution is, I'm going to help a child move there, we become the coach to help them at any age, and we're coming alongside that child, not always in a comforting role, but in a guiding role, just like the Holy Spirit comes alongside of us. So this whole model is built on God's relationship with us. And the Holy Spirit comes along to be our guide. He guides us into all truth, the Bible says. He convicts us of sin. He's like this personal coach. And I think that's what we're emulating as we work with our children. We're the coaches for them to move them in the right direction.
Yeah, I saw the statistic about how much time a dad spends with his kids, and I thought it was interesting. This is what the quote says from parents.com. It says the typical dad spends 6.5 hours a week with his children, less than an hour a day, and far less time than the typical mom spends. That's not earth-shattering. But it says still, that's more than double the 2.6 hours weekly that men devoted to their families 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. Which I think is a remarkable thing. Why do you think we're seeing this dramatic change?
Well, I think the whole roles and relationships in a family are changing. I just think people are recognizing that when that discipleship takes place in the home, that marriages need to be nurtured, that parenting is something that's more not just babysitting, it's a process. We're building into the lives of children. The whole greater understanding of the role of the family is so big. It's just affecting people on all levels. Even non-Christians are realizing this. Parents.com isn't reporting just Christians. They're reporting general statistics of the population.
Right.
But the reality is, as we are having this growing understanding of what parenting is or husbandry is or any of those things, we're understanding them better. Then we're also competing with the advancement of busyness in our lives. Our lives are becoming more complex. We sometimes create that. It's not just work. It's that we feel like, well, in order to get my child in the best school, there's a lot of things I can do for my child to excel their development. Sports, martial arts, art, drama, music. All of those are designed to excel a child's development. If I can help my child excel now, it's going to equip them as they go forward. And one of the things we're saying is, you are right. You want to look for things that will help them excel, but the greatest thing that you can give your child to help them excel in their lives is this spiritual training. Because when a 5-year-old realizes that God is in charge of this world, not him, that is a big spiritual revelation. When a 10-year-old realizes that it's not about me, it's about loving others, that God has given me this command to love others and care for them, to serve, that's just such a big realization. And those things don't come in Sunday school classes only. I think Sunday school is great support. They come in the home. And when the home becomes this place of nurture for spiritual relationships, then God is able to do some amazing work in the lives of children. It really excels their development more than anything else can, which poses a problem, let me say, because sometimes parents have competing ideas. They want to have their kid grow spiritually and bring them to church, but they can't do that because they have sports events on Sunday morning. What are they going to do with that? I think that sometimes parents make mistakes. Then their children get to be 10, 12, 14 years old, and they don't feel like going to church. They want to go to this and that. And so I think we make a mistake at that. We made a mistake before, earlier, and it starts to grow and just says the value of spiritual growth is not as high as the value of whatever else. So we got to be careful in that whole choices that we make.
Yeah, and I see that some of these choices, if a dad or mom has made mistakes when the kids are younger, that they become more passive, just trying to give the kids what they want, almost as a last ditch effort to keep the kids in their lives. So instead of parenting them in the way that they ought to be parenting their child, then they just try and be a friend, and then a friend with a bank account. Have you seen this in some of your coaching as well?
Yeah, I would say so you got to realize I often see it on the backside that when all these things are starting to backfire on them. So it doesn't work to allow your child to make decisions or to give them a cell phone early. And when you do, then you have ramifications. And so now we got a problem we're dealing with. Or you allow a child freedom and the child now isn't doing their homework and other things because they don't feel like it's valuable. And so now, you're in my office, that kind of thing. So I would suggest that parents have to make shifts along the way. And some of the good things that parents do in loving their kids and giving them things and caring for them, they just need to make a shift and move, because I would suggest that indulgence or overindulgence with children isn't giving them too much. It's giving them more than their character can handle.
Wow.
So we got to be building character if we're going to give a child a cell phone. We got to be building character. We're going to give them freedom to make choices about their time. So character is a heart issue.
Right.
So if we're building character, then children can handle more privileges. And so we have to be working on that level.
If done well, if parented well, and if people are to take the principles, the heart-based approach, and do those things, at what approximate age do you recommend that a parent get their child a cell phone?
Well, I can't answer the question based on age. So
Okay.
I'm continually telling parents what I just said, that character has to match privilege.
Okay.
So you can't say to a child, hey, you can babysit when you're 13, because we don't know if you're going to have the character to babysit when you're 13. When we talk about electronics in children, that's a whole category of challenges that children face. And it involves a number of different things. Cell phone usage is one thing, but social media access, internet access is another. Shopping, which is looking at styles, values, whether you buy them or not. Entertainment, which is surfing YouTube or Facebook or those other places. So there's a whole bunch of ways that children can overindulge in electronics. And so when we have electronic addiction in children, whether they're 5 or 10 or 15. And so we have to know how to incorporate a healthy sense of electronics with the unhealthy ramifications of this. So that work is very important. And so I'm saying to parents, you'll know when your child's addicted because you're going to see in the child demandingness when it comes to electronics, self-protection and tension created when you try to separate them from the electronics. You're going to see mood issues where the child's either hyper angry more than the situation warrants, because they're learning how to blow things up on, in their video games, or they're going to feel like anxious because they're always wondering if I have enough likes and so on as a teenager. When you're seeing those things, you're dealing with electronic addiction, and you've got to make some major changes in a child's life. So I recommend for parents generally push it off as much as you can in all categories, because it robs children in their development of other benefits, and it becomes addicting to children. So we have to be really careful about electronics and kids.
That's a main concern that I have. My kids are a little bit older, so they didn't have electronics and phones and YouTube and all that at the onset. I have a lot of people that I'm around in my community that, they have infants, and those kids, they have to have a plan to how are they going to regulate electronics. And one of the things that I'm really concerned about, and I'm just wondering, and I say worry, it isn't like it keeps me up at night, but I'm aware of it. I'll put it to you that way. Is what is the electronic addiction? What is that actually going to cause in the next generation? My opinion, and I'll let you weigh in on it, Scott. My opinion is that we're going to have all sorts of addictions based off of devices and social media, YouTube, all of those things, all the science is proving the dopamine drops and everything that's happening with Instagram and Facebook likes and stuff like that. But I think that we're just raising up a generation of kids who's just going to be addicted, and they're going to need the equivalent to a 12-step process or 12-step process and plan to be free of that addiction. Do you think that's overreaching, or do you think that's fairly accurate?
No, it's accurate. And the science now is demonstrating this. You're hearing the cry from even the educational institutions, which are now part of the problem, because everybody gets a computer now when you go to school. A lot of these schools, you have an iPad or some tablet that you're working on while you're involved in this. So, but everybody now is becoming more aware of the problem. So you're talking to me about the problem. I understand the problem. The question is, what's the solution?
Yeah.
That's what we've got to work on. And at the National Center for Biblical Parenting, we are developing solutions. We have a whole infographic on electronics that people want to access these things. They can go to our blog at thrivingkidsconnection.com or and learn about it, or they can email me at scott@biblicalparenting.org. And I mean, we've got so many resources, many of them free for people, so that they can know what to do. I just think there's parenting skills that are required in order to help parents know how to address this. Parents have to be working on some skills, because I think sometimes parents take their child's emotional antics personally. And so we need to realize the child has a problem and may try to use emotions to control the situation. So we've got to do something about that. We need to learn how to be firm without being harsh with kids, because firmness builds character, but harshness damages relationship. When children don't have self-control, they need parental control. So we're going to use controls with children because they don't have what they need inside. There's a whole bunch of things parents have to do to prepare themselves to deal with electronics. The whole idea that everyone's doing it, where kids say, you're the strictest parents, we can't allow those things to deter us. We have to be able to address that. But I think one of the big things is parents have to be prepared to handle the conflict. When they refuse to interact with an angry child because the child's being demanding, that's good, but they have to also be willing to listen and teach them when things are calm. So there's a lot of work here that electronics provide us an arena. It's like you go into the arena where the battle takes place. You're walking into the arena. You got to have the tools to do that, because we got to think past the presence convenience of the electronics to the bigger picture of health and balance in the life of a child. That's where we're headed, and we're trying to help parents do that. So we have scriptures to consider that parents can use. We give instructions and guidelines for parents, but they're not formulas.
Right.
You got to know when your child's moving in this area of addiction, and then know when to turn it off and when to stop. So there's a lot of, when I work with parents, we start limiting the electronics right away. In some cases, children take fasts from electronics. I think it's good for any of us, even as adults. But just think of being able to use your cell phone or your computer for a month. That would just change your life. I mean, we're learning some things about with the health crisis in our community. We're learning about limits we have to live within. But I mean, there's a lot of adults who are dealing with their own addictions to electronics, and so we have to set limits. When you come into a meal, I think all the electronics should be parked somewhere so you can have a meal together and talk. And we've got to set limits on children who sleep with their cell phones and aren't getting enough sleep, and that's all the electronic addiction stuff that we have to put together. So
I was reading in a book this week by Andy Crouch, The Tech Wise Family, and I believe it was in that book that he made reference to one of the suggestions he gave to trying to be tech wise as a family is to have a tech-free room in your home.
Interesting.
To where when you go into the room, it's tech-free. So you're going to engage in relationships. It's everybody already knows, hey, that's what this room is for. And we're going to connect and kind of remove all of the, what could be distractions or things that would just get in the way and become just those impediments relationally.
Sounds like a good idea. I'll give you another quick idea that you can think about, or your listeners can think about. Children who walk around the house with headphones in are expressing the fact that they're not available. It's not a good social principle. So I would suggest a rule that says always one ear open. If you're in a public place or you're around other people, you need to have one headphone off, because what that does is it communicates a message. You know how it is. Somebody's walking in the head. You feel uncomfortable. Someone's walking around with headphones. You feel like you can't engage them. Yes. It's not good social practice.
Right.
And we need to be available to each other. It's just a good way of communicating to children that relationships are important. They can't block them all out.
Mm.
That's going to take some firmness. It's going to take some working through conflict. Parents need help with that. That's why when we do heart-based approach to parenting, we recognize that there are deeper issues going on. This isn't about electronics, but just take adolescence for a moment. From the age 10 to 25, which is what adolescence is today, ages 10 to 25, there's 3 stages. But in that adolescent period of time, what we're doing is helping children develop 3 skills. 1 is emotional management. 2 is creative conflict resolution, and 3 is gracious communication. So whenever a child experiences a difference with their parent, teacher, sibling, or anybody, they have to engage in those 3 things: conflict, good conflict skills, management skills, good gracious communication they have to be able to deal with, and emotional management. They have to be able to deal with those things in order to be effective in life. So those are the children believe, young people believe today, and partly because we as parents communicate this, they believe their job is to have fun. That is so dangerous. Especially if you imagine children, if they believe their job is to have fun, they go outside of the societal boundaries, the legal boundaries, the family values in order to have that fun. It's really dangerous. And what do parents, child comes back from an event, and what do they say? Did you have fun? As if fun is the measurement of their event. No, I think when we send kids out, we don't say have fun. We say do the right thing.
Yeah.
Take care of your brother. Send them out on a mission, because young people need to learn that they are on a mission. They are not out to play. Pleasure is not their goal, but many children believe this, and we have to adjust that. So parents have a real important job in the role of their children to help them to believe certain things. That's heart-based stuff. So we're going to practice living a different way. It's just so strategic to use a heart-based approach when you're trying to help children grow up, whether they're 2 or 3 or 12 or 13 or 20, or however they are. Whatever influence you have, you're using that to help them to grow and mature.
So the age of adolescence, you said, goes up to 25. Has that changed statistically over the last, say, 10, 15 years, or in this generation, or is that just kind of a known number?
I would say it's been changing over the last 20 years. But here's what happened. Okay, puberty is not the onset of adolescence as much now, although it does start earlier and earlier. It is the issuing of a child into the adult world, which takes place primarily through technology. Giving a child a cell phone, it usually takes place around age 10. I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying that's what happens in our society. So children are now entering into an adult world where they must deal with adult issues and wrestle with technology and all the bombardment of things, okay? And so the first stage of adolescence goes from 12 to 16, give or take 2 years, and that age is characterized by emotionally driven decision-making. I do what I feel like doing. I eat junk food. If I don't feel like doing my homework, I don't do that, and so on. And that's why they engage in risky behaviors during 12 to 16 that are dangerous for them. And frankly, parents must, in those ages, exert more parental controls. Very important. The age between 16 and 20, give or take 2 years, is the age where children are launching into a mission-oriented view of life. I'm going to college, so I'm going to study. It modifies, it mediates some of their emotionally driven behavior. I want to be healthy, so I'm not going to eat junk food. So it's during that time. You'll see the switch in your child. They start developing their own convictions about how they're going to live during that time. So that goes from 16 to 20, give or take a couple years. And then the third stage goes from 20 to 25, give or take a couple years. And that is the stage of launching, when we're really helping a child to be independent. That doesn't mean they have to live alone, but they could if they needed to. So they're developing their ability to manage their finances, make decisions better, just make their own decisions, medical issues, have a job, be able to drive, all of those things that take place in launching come in that last stage of adolescence, which really today doesn't take place for most young people until they hit, the mid to later 20s.
Okay. How would you help some parents who came to you and they want to teach their kids critical thinking? How would you approach that, and what kind of tips would you give to some parents who are they see that their child can't think on their own, and there's no physiological issues that they know of, but they just need some strategies. How would you help them?
When you say critical thinking, you mean the ability to think on their own?
Yeah, and make decisions, make sound decisions. Yes, be
All
able
right.
to know, if there's two or three different paths, to say, I can look at this, I can look at this, but I'm not going to choose those two. I'm going to go this way because it's going to be better for me.
Okay, let's see. I want to challenge a question if I can.
Okay.
Uh, because that's an advanced skill.
Okay.
Critical thinking is an advanced skill, and I find that many children don't have the basic skills in order to do what you're saying.
Okay.
So that's what I want to challenge the question, because here's what I think happens, okay? Parents want their children to question authority and set their own limits because they don't want children to be taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be able to set boundaries. But setting of boundaries and questioning authority, although both are good, are advanced skills. If children do not have the basic skill, which is to give up your agenda, to submit to authority, then they're lacking something very important that's going to help contribute to a successful marriage, to be able to work on a team, to cooperate with others. So this ability of giving up your agenda is strategic. I have to tell parents sometimes, let's put off the critical thinking part for just a bit, okay, not indefinitely. It's very important. But in order for a child to be able to think critically, they can't think selfishly. And the challenge that many children have is they think about themselves. They're their emotions are so tied into their desires, and their desires have turned into expectations and demands that when things don't go their way, the child gets angry. And then what do? Then they develop a victim mentality that says, if everybody else would change, then I'd be fine. Do you see how self-focused that is?
Mm-hmm.
I think
it leads to narcissism. It sounds like to me.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like it just feeds it.
So the question about critical thinking can lead parents to believe that critical thinking is a very important thing for children to learn first. It is very important, but the first thing we teach children is how to work on a team, how to cooperate, which means that their first answer needs to be yes. Because this is what God has for us. When someone asks you for something, I believe that God has designed us to be, as Christians, that our first response should be yes, or at least our desire should be yes, because we are servants and we love and we give. That's who we are. So if you come and ask me for something, my first response in my heart should be yes. Now I might have to say, yes, I'd like to do that, but I can't right now. My heart should be yes. If you have a child whose first response is no, or wait a minute, which is what most children have, they aren't even at the place where they can say yes yet in their heart. So God wants to do a work inside of a child's heart where their first answer needs to be yes. So, son, when I call your name, and I even practice this, you need to say yes, Dad, not no, Dad. The wait a minute disease is dangerous for children because then they have to evaluate every request that's ever made of them. And I think then they can't really listen to God. Because what they tell God to do is wait till I finish this show, God. Wait till I finish having fun here. And they don't know how to listen to the Lord. And there's sometimes in God's word where we obey first and then we talk about it later. So God wants to do some deep work inside of our hearts to train us to follow him. And that requires trust. Trust that someone else is making decisions here. Our children don't really know how to do that many times. So if your child does know how to cooperate and they're working with you and they're doing their chores on their own and they have a good attitude when you ask them to do something extra and they report back when they're done, hey, Mom, I'm done. They got that working relationship. Then I think we go to these other things which are in the critical thinking department, which are questioning authority, and they are setting limits or learning how to appeal. That's when we teach children what we call the wise appeal. And the wise appeal basically has three parts. It says, I understand you want me to, fill in the blank. I have a problem with that because, so could I please do this? Which probably brings a compromise into the situation. Dad, I understand you want me to not eat a snack right now because we're going to have dinner in a half hour. And sometimes I don't eat all my dinner. I understand that. I have a problem with that because I'm really hungry. I didn't have any lunch. So Could I please have half of an apple and then I'll eat my dinner? So do you see what the child's learning how to do here? The child's learning how to take a no answer and turn it into something like Daniel did, or Esther did, or Nehemiah did with the king. They're learning how to make a wise appeal. That's your critical thinking. But I don't think you can start there. I think most children need to learn obey first, and then we'll talk about it, before they can learn this honoring principle. This idea, by the way, is in our book. It's called Say Goodbye to Whining, Complaining, and Bad Attitudes in You and Your Kids. But it's a book about the biblical concept of honor. Parents often teach obedience, but they don't teach honor. So we're showing what honor looks like. Children need to learn obedience, and they need to learn honor, because hidden within obedience and honor are the secret ingredients children need to be successful in life.
Awesome. Well, we're at the back end of our recording today, and I want to honor your time. I would like for you just to, if you would, just kind of give just a boost of encouragement to a dad who maybe is struggling along right now, and he's trying to find a way to connect with his kids. You may not know how. Maybe he feels like a failure, and he just needs some encouragement just to get back to being the dad that God wants him to be. How could you encourage a man like that?
Well, what we do, and what we regularly do, is help dads, because dads tend to gravitate toward this, is think in terms of strategy. Think in terms of strategy. God often has equipped men to think in terms of strategy. Not that women can't. It's just that men tend to think that way. I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to get this done. Now, if you're going to think in terms of strategy, you're going to first identify where you want to go with this child, and then you're going to ask questions about how am I going to get there. So if you identify a target quality you're working with your child, how are you going to get there? The very first thing you're going to do is connect with the child's heart. Look for ways to emotionally connect. You're not even talking about the issue yet or where you're headed. You're talking about emotionally connecting. How does this child need emotional connectedness? I gave you 7 tools earlier that we use, but I never know which one of those tools is going to connect with a child. I lay them all out for a parent so a parent can make some decisions and know what to do, and pick from the different avenues, because parents often know, hey, I think that one's going to work with my child. And we have amazing stories about how parents can do that. So be in tune to your child. It's trial and error sometimes. I'm going to try this and see if that works. And what I'm trying to do is connect with that child in a way that's going to bring some long-term results. So I would say think strategy. That's going to move you way down the path from most parents who are doing reactive parenting. You don't want to do reactive parenting. You want to think strategy, and that's going to get you a lot further along with your child.
Excellent. This has been a great conversation, Scott. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of myself and then all of our listeners who are dads or soon to be dads or going to be dads. You have given us a lot to think about and a lot to do. So I really appreciate your time and all of your education and all of your experience. We really, really appreciate it today, because you put it in such a way that is very applicable and challenging, which is good, especially for men. So thank you.
Thank you, Chad. It's been great to be with you.